So we've now had a complete week with these new Snapdragon laptops. And Gary and I have been burning the midnight oil and sinking a lot of coffee to get all the testing done that we wanted to with these new machines. Now we've already dropped an unboxing, a gaming video and a productivity video on these new range of laptops, and I will put them in the link down below just in case you missed them. But today, with all that we've learned, we want to finally bring you our Surface Pro 11 versus Surface Laptop 7 to help you decide which of these amazing new machines to buy. Now, although both these devices start at £1,049 in the UK, they are two incredibly different machines. So we're going to be looking at the performance, the usability, the battery life, the different configurations available, and just the day-to-day features that make each of these so unique to help you obviously decide. So first of all, let's start out talking about the configurations available when you decide to purchase one of these devices. Now, as I mentioned, they both start at £1,049 in the UK. But the Surface Laptop 7 is £1,049 and that's all you need to buy. So it is the cheaper device because with the Surface Pro 11, although it starts out at £1,049, you won't get the keyboard or the pen, which you're going to need with one of these devices. Now, if you've already got the Surface Pro 8 or 9 keyboard and pen, they will work with this new Surface Pro 11. But if you haven't, you're talking about £280 in the UK for the basic keyboard and pen, or £430 for the Flex, more expensive model that we're testing in this machine today. Now, as you can see, that drastically increases the price of this two-in-one device. Now, when you're buying the base spec of either of these machines, you're going to get 16 gigabytes of RAM. You're also going to get 256 gigabytes of SSD storage space. And obviously, as you upgrade through the different tiers, you will get more SSD storage space. But for most people, I think it's not a bad starting 16 gig, 256 gig. Also, the Surface Pro 11 is incredibly easy to access the SSD. It's a magnetic hatch on the back. You pop that off and you can change that SSD yourself. Whereas on the Surface Laptop 7, although you can change the SSD, it's a bit more complicated, and we will be doing a full video on how to upgrade both of these machines very soon. Now, with regards to actual screen sizes, on the laptop, the base model is the 13.8-inch screen that we've got here. You can also choose the 15-inch model. Now, that is a little bit more expensive. It starts at £1,350 in the UK. So for that £1,350, you do get that 15-inch screen. You still get 16 gigabytes of RAM, but you get 256 gigabytes of SSD, and it only comes with the Elite on that 15-inch. So you can't get the Plus version that you get in the base model of the actual Surface laptop. Now, I do actually have the base Surface laptop here with the Plus, and we have the Surface Pro with the Elite chip and the OLED display, so that we are going to be able to test the differences between those two chips in the performance section later. So then moving across to the Surface Pro 11, and when you're buying the base configuration of this machine, you're going to get an IPS panel, 16 gigs of RAM, and a 256 gigabyte SSD. You do not get the OLED screen. You need to buy the higher tier, and then you're going to get the Elite chip again rather than the Plus that you get in the base model. You still get the 16 gigs, and then you get 512 gigabyte SSDs, and obviously that OLED 120Hz display. And I have to be honest, it is beautiful, but we will discuss that more in the display section. With regards to colours, on the 13.8-inch laptop and on the actual Pro 11, you can have the platinum, the black, the sapphire blue that we've got on this model here, and also this new June colour. But if you buy the 15-inch laptop, there is only the platinum or the black. So if you want the different colours of the laptop, you do need to get the 13.8-inch. Now, personally, when I'm looking at these, I think the 13.8-inch laptop is probably the better size to get for most people for that portability, but it's still a great screen size for daily usability. So now we've talked about what you're getting with the package. Let's now look at these two devices side by side. Now, we're going to first talk about size of these devices themselves. The Surface Pro is a 13-inch display, whereas the Surface Laptop is a 13.8-inch display. Now, when you put them side by side, I think you can see there's quite a difference in sort of screen real estate between the two. It does feel like a lot larger area that you're using on the screen here. Now, that is great, but sadly, on the Surface Laptop, you're actually getting a slightly lower resolution display than you do on the Surface Pro 11. Now, if you're just looking at one to the other side by side, you're not going to notice neither of these looks pixelated, but you do notice this is a slightly better looking screen, and that's before you even get the OLED option. With regards to the size itself, obviously these are both very compact devices, but if you take the Surface Pro versus the Surface Laptop, you can see the Surface Pro 11 is a lot smaller than that Surface Laptop. You can see here the sides and the backs. And we look at the actual thickness, again, it's a lot thinner, but this is before we put the keyboard cover on. Let's just take the Flex keyboard cover and pop that on, and you can see then they're a very similar thickness. So the Surface Pro 11 is a slightly more portable device, but not by a lot. Now obviously the laptop is just your standard clamshell laptop. You have a screen which just opens nicely, sturdy hinge. It is a touch display, but sadly this year it cannot accept pen input like you used to be able to. Whereas with the Surface Pro 11, again, we get that touch display, but has the pen input with the pen that is included with the keyboard in a lot of cases. Obviously, being an actual 2-in-1 that you can rip the keyboard off, we get a kickstand on the Surface Pro 11. And it is a great for if you're using this for drawing, that you can push this all the way back. It's incredibly sturdy. And if you get the more expensive, and it's crazily expensive, Flex keyboards, you can rip the keyboard off, use the pen on the device, and this is now also connects wirelessly, so you can type and work on the device without having it plugged in like you did on previous Surfaces. So that's quite a nice little feature. And this Flex keyboard does work on the Surface Pro 8 and 9. We've already tested that. So if you do want one of these for your older machine, you can go right ahead and buy that. So now we've talked about the usability, I want to also mention the ports, because if you're buying that Surface Pro 11, it is very versatile, but you do get less ports. Now on the right side, you just get the Microsoft Connect port for their power adapter. Now that will obviously then, as the magnetic adapter plugs into here to charge your device, but you can also buy the Microsoft docks as well, which will also plug into here and charge and give you extra ports for your devices. That works on both of these. And then on the other side, we get two USB 4 or USB-C ports. On the top, we've got the power button and the volume rocker, and that's it for ports. Whereas on the laptop, being a sort of standard clamshell laptop, we get a headphone jack. That's something that I do miss from the Surface Pro range now. A USB-A, two USB 4 ports or USB-C ports, and on the other side, we get the Surface Connect port for their magnetic charger. So you are getting a better range of ports for the Surface laptop. I particularly like this because not only, as I say, do you get the headset ports, I still use wired headphones. I love having that USB-A port still, mostly for things like a wireless mouse dongle, because I do love having the wireless dongle plugged in all the time onto my laptops. Whereas with the Surface Pros, I end up using them over Bluetooth, and I do feel a difference between the 2.4 gigahertz and Bluetooth on mice in daily use. So the next thing I do want to talk about is the weight of these devices. If you're obviously buying one of these for mobility, so let's get my trusty scales here, let's zero those. So the Surface laptop, let's see if it comes in as it claims, 1.335 kilograms. So it is still very light, but when we compare that to the Surface Pro 11, this is coming in at 895 grams, but obviously you're going to want that keyboard, because not only does it give you a keyboard and pen, it does protect the screen when it's closed, which you need if you're chucking it in a bag. So popping that on there, that then takes the weight to 1.249 kilograms. So even with the keyboard attached and the pen attached, it is still lighter than that Surface Laptop 7. So if his weight is an absolute priority, this is the better device. Now I do want to also mention, when we talk about the usability, we've talked about the fact they've got a touch screen, but something else I do want to mention, they both have fantastic keyboards. If you buy both the standard type cover keyboard or this Flex type cover keyboards, they feel amazing for a keyboard that you can rip straight off the device. The keyboard on the Surface laptop is equally good. In fact, I'll probably say it's slightly better because you do get a bit of bounce when you're typing on a type cover. That's always been the case. That is a compromise whenever you're using this type of 2-in-1. Whereas if you're somebody that's going to be typing all day, every day, I think this could definitely be the better buy purely because it feels incredible, it feels solid, it's just an amazing typing experience. It's probably my favorite typing experience of any laptop. Another thing, if you're buying the Flex keyboard for the Surface Pro 11, you actually get a haptic touchpad, so you can click anywhere, and that is really handy, just like the Apple haptic touchpads. And on the Surface laptop, they also get the haptic touchpad. And the good news is, it's actually a lot deeper than it is on the Surface Pro. So this is definitely a slightly better touchpad because of the size. Both haptic, both feel amazing, both track amazing, but you can click anywhere and you get a very slight haptic feel. So you should be able to see me 2-finger clicking. And just like if you're using an Apple Mac or anything like that, it is incredible because you don't get that horrible springboard effect on a cheaper touchpad. So when you're trying to click at the top, nothing happens. So it's lovely that we're finally now getting that on the Surface laptop range, and they're given an option to the Surface Pro with the Flex keyboard. You are going to pay for that though, because this Surface Pro Flex keyboard with the pen comes in at £430 in the UK, so it is a crazy price. So in my eyes, if you're somebody that's using this as a daily beat and you can be typing on it predominantly and using it as a laptop on your lap, this is definitely the better view. It's great because it's so solid, but it's sitting on your lap. It's easy to transport around because you don't have to worry about the kickstand, because that isn't great on your lap. And you get this amazing haptic trackpad. Whereas the Surface Pro, it is going to be a lot more expensive once you start adding the accessories in, and it isn't great on your lap, but obviously you've got a lot more features that you get with the 2-in-1, so you're able to rip the keyboard off using the pen, so that should hopefully help you sway your decision, but it is going to be a lot more expensive to do that. So now that we looked at the trackpad and the keyboard, I want to just quickly mention the speakers. Now on the Surface Pro 11, you do get the 2 speakers on either side of the screen, and they're shooting that sound at you, and it does sound great. Whereas the Surface Laptop 7 has the speakers inside here. Also sounds amazing. We're going to put them side by side so that you can hear the difference. Speaker test of the Surface Laptop 7 and the Surface Pro 11. We've got the laptop on the left and the Pro on the right. We're going to start testing at 50%. Let's start with the actual laptop. Now the Pro. Now 80%. And then finally 100%. Wow, both pretty much sound incredible. I'm enjoying listening to both of those. I think the Surface Pro 11 sounds slightly better because it's projected right towards your your face, your ears. But they're both great. I don't think you'd have any problems choosing either of these for the speakers. So then now let's move up to the actual displays on these devices. As I mentioned, there is no OLED option with the Surface laptop, but you do get a 2304 by 1536 resolution 30.8-inch panel. It's also very bright, and it's 120 Hertz with variable refresh rate. If you want that, you can turn that off. Whereas the Surface Pro 11 starts with the IPS panel with 2880 by 1920. So it's a 4:3 aspect ratio, which is unusual but great for work. Again, it's 120 Hertz with variable refresh rate, but you do get this OLED option, and I have got it here. Now the OLED option is incredible. It's expensive, but it's incredible. Now the OLED version in the UK starts at $1549. It then gives you access to that Elite CPU, and it gives you 512GB SSDs as well as this OLED display. But if you've used this display and you're using it side by side, you realize how incredible OLED looks. Even though it's incredibly glossy, the colors are beautiful, the refresh rate is incredible, and I've not noticed any flicker with this OLED panel, because in the past, a lot of OLED panels do flicker at quite a low speed, and it does give me a headache. No issues at all using this with the PWM brightness. And I do think it's very sad, really, that although they've given us the OLED option as an expensive increase on the Surface Pro 11, why have they not given us one on a higher level tier of the Surface Laptop 7? I think it could really benefit from it. It's a real shame we've not had that option. And then above the screen, we get the IR facial recognition software for logging you in, and it works incredibly well on both of these devices. I've never had any work as well as they do on the Surfaces, and I've loved that about the Surface. You literally open the lid or drop down the keyboard and bang, you're in every time, even in low light. We also get a great webcam and microphones, and they look and sound like this. This is a test of the webcam and the microphones on the Surface Laptop 7. And this is a test of the webcam and the microphones on the Surface Pro 11. So then on to the performance. And these ARM chips have been really interesting. It's been great fun benchmarking them. Now I want to quickly start with the CPU side. And I'm going to focus in this actual review of these two machines with the Plus and the Elite chip using ARM benchmarks. Because Obviously, not everything is ARM capable yet, and if you've watched our productivity or our original unboxings, we did run a lot of the software that's been translated from x86 over to ARM, and obviously, although it does a really good job, you're losing a lot of performance in that translation. But we're going to start with Geekbench 6, because that is native ARM, and these have some very, very good CPU benchmarks. Both the single core and the multi-core scores are pretty impressive. The Elite chip that we've got in the actual Pro 11 scores up to 2,800 on the single core and up to 14,000 on some of our runs on that multi-core score, which is really very impressive. Now, the actual Plus model, which has got 2 less CPU cores, still scored very well. Now, the actual single core was slightly lower than on the actual Elite chip, and also we lost a little bit of performance on this actual, and it's only quite a short benchmark in the Geekbench 6. So obviously there is a slight gain here for the Elite over the Plus, but it's not massive. But what is very impressive is when you put it up against the previous Surface Pro 9 or our favourite, which is the Ryzen that we had in the T14S. They both at the time scored pretty well on these benchmarks, but now pale in comparison to these new ARM chips. So as we see more ARM apps come across, these are going to be incredible devices. Now moving to a long-term torch test of Cinebench R24, which again is native ARM, plus has Intel versions. These score really well. The Plus came in at about 800 on the multi-core score, whereas the Elite came in at about 880. So you're talking about a 5% increase for those extra 2 cores, which is a little bit disappointing. I was hoping the Elite would do much better, and I think we're limited here by wattage more than those extra 2 cores. So if they could let them stretch the legs a bit further, you'd probably see a bigger difference in the actual scores. And also the single core scores does perform better on the Elite chip over the actual Plus chip. So in my honest opinion, over these CPU benchmarks so far, I don't think the Elite Premium is worth it, especially if you don't need that OLED screen or if you're looking at a laptop, I would just get the Plus. And what's very interesting is when we look then against, again, the Surface Pro 9 and the Ryzen 7840U that comes in the T14S, these were very poorly performing in the Intel x86 version of the actual Cinebench R24 versus these ARM chips, showing you that these are going to be some great CPU performance machines as everything becomes available for ARM. And if you've watched our productivity test, a lot of things are already very capable on these ARM CPUs. The only thing that we had a problem with was video editing, because Premiere Pro hasn't got its ARM version out yet, and DaVinci Resolve is still in beta, and I don't think it's properly optimized for these ARM chips. And that's a real shame, because that's one thing that I personally would like to do. I know not everybody's a YouTuber, but I would love to be able to video edit on one of these tiny machines. Moving over to the GPU, this here was a little bit lackluster in my opinion. Running the Geekbench 6 GPU tests on these, they both came in at a very humble 20,000 points, which is, although much better than the Intel Iris in the Surface Pro 9, it's still miles behind about the 30,000 we got on the T14's Ryzen chip. Now Ryzen are obviously known for their graphics, but I was hoping that these GPUs would have done slightly better. But it's still almost doubling of performance over the previous Surface Pro 9, so if you're not using things that are massively GPU bound, these are going to be great devices. And if you've watched our gaming video, a lot of the games out there for x86 still worked pretty well emulated on these ARM chips. And as we start seeing more ARM games or ARM 3D apps, they're going to work great on these devices. And even Blender worked well through the translation software. So if you are using some CAD or 3D sort of Blender software, no issues so far with my testing on these devices. Another thing these devices did excel at was the performance on battery and the battery life. Now when we ran all of our tests on the actual battery, not only did it actually not have a massive effect on the battery drop off, but also it was running at maximum performance on battery mode, which is something that's pretty unheard of for most Intel chips. And as we did our battery testing, we didn't want to just do our normal wireless streaming tests. We really did put these through the ringer for a few days. But the good news is, if you are just watching Netflix or YouTube over wireless with these devices, we actually got just over 20 hours on this Surface Laptop 7, and we also got 13 hours and 40 minutes on this Surface Pro 11 with OLED display, and OLED are obviously known to use more battery life. Now, obviously, this makes this Surface Laptop 7 currently our Windows battery champion, so if you're somebody that wants to watch a lot of movies, do a lot of typing, a lot of light work, this is going to be an incredible option for a lot of people. Now, as we actually use these machines for heavy workflow on battery, and that's both a mix of GPU work and pretty heavy CPU work, we actually manage very similar times on both of these machines. The actual Surface Laptop 7 got 5 hours and 40 minutes, and the Surface Pro 11 got 5 hours and 35 minutes, so they were really close between them. But either way, and I'm talking really heavy use here, not just light use, that's pretty impressive. And this is something we've not really seen before on a Windows laptop, and they were running full speed whilst they were doing this. So I do feel like we're moving towards the Apple Silicon sort of era in Windows. They've got very tiny power supplies for these devices, which are nice and compact. Plus you can charge them via a low-powered sort of USB-C, a power delivery on your monitor or a power bank to keep these going because they're so efficient. Having tested it on my 4K monitor via power delivery, these both worked absolutely flawlessly. Now, I think the Surface Pro 11 has an advantage in this area because one thing I love to do is rip that keyboard off, pop this right in front of my keyboard and use it as a second screen below the monitor. That's something I love about the Surface Pro and I've used for years. But these both work brilliantly docked, and that's something if you're using it as a daily beta, it's a great option to just come in, one cable to your monitor and have these up and running. And as I mentioned in the unboxings and both the gaming and the productivity videos, the actual noise and heat on these devices is also very impressive. They both max out at 42 decibels when you really put heavy load through them or you're gaming on them, and the heat was never an issue. There's a bit of warmth in the middle of the Surface laptop keyboard, and there's a bit of heat on the back of the Surface Pro 11 when you're like fully utilizing these devices. So that takes me to the conclusion, and I've had a really great time for the last 2 weeks testing something very different on the Windows platform. Now, there was a couple of disappointments with the gaming because obviously there's so few ARM games out there, and the translation software does do a good job, but there are still some issues. But as a lot of people mentioned in the post, you don't buy one of these devices for gaming. And that is true, but it's still nice to be able to do that on the side when you get 5 minutes spare. But when it came to productivity, these machines absolutely excelled. There was pretty much, other than video editing, nothing these machines could do. And I'm hoping once we get an updated version of Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve for ARM, these may then also be viable light video editing machines, making them really a jack of all trade for productivity. Coding has been absolutely outstanding on these, and web design and some other bits and pieces I've been doing on them. And they really could, for me, replace the majority of my daily use. And so I certainly would be looking, if I could video edit on them, they would be the absolute perfect device for me. So the question is really, if you decided on an ARM machine, which one do you choose? Now, if you know you need a 2-in-1, then obviously it's an easy decision. The Surface Pro 11 is a very unique device. I do absolutely love it. I love that we get the OLED display, but you really are paying for it. I don't think this flex cover is worth it for most people. £430 for a keyboard and pen is insane. Yes, it's lovely being able to rip it off and use it over Bluetooth. And it's also lovely having that haptic trackpad. But I mean, that price, that is insane. Hoping we might see some sales on it, then it could be worth it. But if you don't need a 2-in-1 or you're not going to be drawing on the device, this is definitely the much better value machine. Coming in at £1,049 for the Plus version, which I think is the version you should get. Upgrade the SSD yourself if you need to. They all come with 16 gigabytes of RAM, so that's not an issue. This is an incredible laptop. The battery life, the keyboard, the extra ports, the slightly bigger screen when you are actually typing on it. And it's just an amazing all-round machine. I love this large haptic touchpad. So if I was choosing for these and I didn't need to draw, I would take the Surface laptop every time. Now I am going to put the links to the other videos down below just in case you missed any. I'm also going to put some links to these machines just in case you want to pick one up. But for me personally, it would have to be, I think, the Surface Laptop 7. I think it really is a truly amazing device. Now, I am going to be doing more coverage in the future because obviously this is still, we're in now the second week of this ARM release. And I think if these are popular, we're going to see a lot more ARM software and even better performance with these actual laptops or 2-in-1. And I would like to see how well these perform when we get more optimized software. Well, that's my thoughts on the Surface Pro 11 and Surface Laptop 7. As always, I'd love to know what you guys think. Would you consider moving to ARM? Which would you pick for these two? Pop your comments down below and I will get back to you. And as always, thanks for watching.